So we had to kind of get started over on our setup. Okay, so today, speaking about phones today are Virginia DeBlay, one of my colleagues, and me will be the speakers. And Virginia and I are both vision rehabilitation teachers here at the council. And so we see lots of people who have questions about phones. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the content. We'll have about 10 minutes at the end for questions. And if you have questions to ask, you can either type them into the window that's just below the public chat area, or if you have a microphone attached to your computer, you can press the control key and a little hand is raised next to your name. If you can't see that, it'll beep and let us know that you know that you're in the queue then to ask a question when the mic is available. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Oh, yeah, we're sharing a headset here, so it'll take a little bit of finagling as we switch off speakers, and also when you're asking questions. So the first thing to talk a little bit about are just some considerations that people make when they're thinking about the telephones and what telephone might work for them. And so this slide just lists some of the key points that people should consider when selecting a phone. And the first one is obviously what kind of a phone is wanted. There's advantages and limitations to all different kinds of phones: corded phones, remote handset phones, cell phones, smartphones. And we're going to come back and talk about each of those. Another feature for people with vision impairment to consider are the keys themselves on the keypad, and we'll talk more about that as we show the demonstration of how you dial. But in general, you want keypad keys that have a distinct feeling to them for you so that it's easy for you to move from one keypad key to the next. Another feature that's helpful for people who have some vision is whether or not there's good contrast on the keys so that they can easily see the numbers, and then whether or not the keys are backlit when you start to do the dialing. Those are all things that for people who have some vision make it easier to see the keys. The display is another consideration. If you have some sight, most phones that have a display are going to be really difficult to see because they have a gray-green display with a slightly darker shade of gray-green writing. There are some phones, and we'll mention those as we go along, that have a backlit display, which does provide high contrast, and several of them now also have large type. So again, that's for people who can have some vision, and then whether or not there's talking displays, and there are a couple that also have that we'll mention. Of course, if you want to use speed dial or contacts, you need to get a phone that allows for that. Answering machine the same. A lot of people like to use a speaker phone where you don't have to sit there and hold up the phone. That's very helpful if you have any type of motor impairments in addition to the vision loss. And also, if you tend to have a long conversation, sometimes it's more comfortable just to sit and talk at the phone rather than to hold it up to your ear. And then one that I've noticed that a lot of people have trouble with on some phones is whether or not you can actually pick them up and hang them up easily. So you think they're hung up, but they're not really in their cradle, so the phone isn't able to bring in another call or it's not charging properly. And so those are just some general things to consider as you're looking for a phone. I'm going to pass the mic to Virginia, and we're going to look at a video on dialing a phone.
Okay. On this phone, It's very easy to orient yourself to the number pad because the number pad starts right at the top of the phone. I have my 3 fingers resting on the top edge of the phone, and I'm sliding them down as a unit, and the first 3 buttons that I come in contact with are the 1, 2, and 3. When I slide my fingers down to the next row, they are on 4, 5, and 6. On the next row is 7, 8, and 9. The bottom row is the 0 is below the 8, and the pound and the star keys are under my other 2, my index and my ring finger. Right below the keypad are 3 emergency call buttons that are designated fire and police and emergency, but we usually use them for the most important people, a child, a neighbor, etc., because you don't have to dial anything before you push these buttons. Once they're programmed, you just push these buttons and they will call immediately what they're programmed to call. The middle button has a clear dot just so you are oriented to these 3 buttons. The 4th button in this row is a speakerphone button, and we have a little Velcro textured mark on this button because it's a flush button that is not raised from the rest of the phone, so it makes it easier to locate the speaker button. On the bottom row, we have a call flash button that's to go between calls if you get a call waiting on your phone, or you can use it to disconnect your phone. The middle button is the memory button that you dial to when you're using your programmed numbers from 1 through 9, and that we have marked with tape. So I'm going to dial a number using this technique, and so I'm going to dial the council's number. So I have my hand on the first 3 buttons up here on the top. I'm going to use my middle finger to push the 2, and I'm going to slide down, and I'm going to push the 5 twice with my middle finger. I'm going to slide my fingers back up, press the number 1 twice, and slide down and press the 6 twice. And that way, even if I pick up my other 2 fingers, they're oriented and they come right back to the numbers where I have my fingers. I don't have all my fingers off the phone pad, the number pad, ever when I'm using this method.
That is the end of our video, and as you can see, that is the demonstration for dialing without using any vision and just using the buttons under your fingers. That way, a partially sighted person can be looking at the number they're dialing rather than looking and struggling to look at the numbers on the keyboard. Takes a little practice, but anybody who has a fairly good tactile feeling can learn to do this. I'm going to give the computer back to Jean.
Okay, we're going to just look at a few of the corded phones that are out there. The first one on the left is the Bell Big Button phone, and this one is pretty popular because the buttons are big, the numbers are raised, and it also has Braille numbers in the upper corners of each of those buttons. And this is a phone that also has speed dial, but the speed dial is a 2-step process because the speed dials are under the numbers 1 through 9 on this phone. It does have 3 direct speed dials, but all the rest are under numbers. The one on the right, the Gmark Ampli 200, Just a different look to a corded phone. It does have 8 speed dial numbers along the left hand or the right hand side of the phone, which gives you direct speed dial rather than having to have a 2-step process to get to the buttons under the 1 through 9 buttons. But the thing to point out on this G mark is it has a lot of buttons on it, and that sometimes you may get more features, but it makes it harder for somebody to use who has low vision, because the buttons will just get confusing. Even though some buttons are small and some are big, it can still be confusing when there's just a lot of touch stimulation available as somebody's trying to figure it out. Okay. So there are some specialty phones like the Amplicom phone on the left that's shown. That one comes with an emergency pendant with it. So this is a phone that you can dial several different emergency numbers in, and the person wears the pendant. And if they need to get some help, they press the pendant. It's not going to a service. It is just starting a dialing chain of the people that they indicated should receive an emergency message. So that may be children or a neighbor, whomever they decide to put in. The one on the right is a Clarity phone that has the pictures across the top for speed dial. Most of the people that we work with would not be able to see the picture of the person in those smaller spaces, but we have used them and put in other tactile cues, either shapes or dot combinations or a braille dot that can get people to make a call with a speed dial without having to see those pictures. Okay, then this G-Mark phone is a phone that we just became aware of, and this is a phone that was developed through the RNIB, which is an association for the blind in the United Kingdom. And this particular phone is fully accessible to people who are blind. And this phone does provide full vocalization of names, numbers, menus, commands, date, and time. So it does give that big button feature as well as a lot of talk back. The display on this one for people who do have some vision is a backlit display. So it gives a sharper contrast image. And what this one has that I've also not seen in other phone options is that you can alter the font and the brightness of that display and the size based on a person's visual impairment. But the main feature of this for someone who's blind using a big button phone is that it does give full auditory feedback to all the menu items, talk back on the buttons for whatever your needs might be. Okay, so that's a little bit about corded phones. I'm going to say just a few words about when you're setting up speed dial for somebody. And this is just seems logical, but sometimes it's harder than it seems to be. And the first step is just to list who the possibilities might be. Don't start dialing in numbers until you first set up the list so that you can eliminate people if you don't have room on your particular speed dial. So if your speed dial can only do 13 numbers and you have 15, you're going to have to get rid of 2. The next is to determine a logical order, and that logical order is for the person who's going to use the phone so that they can more easily remember the speed dial setup. And I've done it like for people where they'll do their kids in birth order, under 1, 2, 3, their oldest, second oldest, third oldest. I've also set them up where you have all your children in a row and then grandchildren, or where you have services, because some people's services are more important, like to be able to call the taxi or to call their pharmacy or to call their doctor. And those come first before friends or family. So determine an order that's going to make sense for the user. Then do your speed dial setup. And After that, always check the accuracy to make sure that those numbers actually go through. It's easy to make an error, and try not to leave somebody in the lurch by having a speed dial number that's not going to work when they have to use it. Then the last step is to make sure that you create a usable listing of those speed dial numbers matched to the person that the speed dial will call. And that can be a large print list, it can be an audio list, it can be a braille list. But just make sure that the person has a backup to their memory of who's under the speed dial buttons. Okay, so next Virginia's going to do a demonstration video here of dialing a cordless phone.
This phone is a Panasonic phone. I'm going to demonstrate that my technique works on this phone the way it worked on the corded big button phone. The only marks we have on this phone are the on button and the disconnect button, and they are up at the top, and we have Velcro on them. And then down below, the big oval button, which is the volume control button, the keypad starts. These keys are very distinctly separated, although they're smaller and closer together than the keys on the previous phone. But you can still do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0 below the 8, and the pound and the star keys on your index and ring finger. To dial a number, you do the same thing. You have to pick your other fingers up a little bit here. 5, 5, 1, 1, 6, 6. And you notice I'm never taking all my fingers off the keypad, because then you lose all of your orientation.
That is the video about the Panasonic phone, and you can do this, by holding the handset in your hand the way it showed, and you can be perfectly accurate, and then you can bring it up to your ear after you dial, and have made your call. Now we have another video for. Yeah.
Okay, we have a few pictures of some different cordless phones. The first set of pictures are phones that you can get where you have a regular corded phone and a cordless phone, the pairing of those together. Sometimes people will have the cordless phone where they're going to be answering the phone. And then the corded phone on their desk where they're going to make phone calls. Depends, but a lot of people do seem to like these combo sets for various reasons. Okay. Then these are just three of the remote handset phones that we've used. The first one is a Bell one. That one has Braille on the buttons of it. The downside is that you might be able to use the Braille to dial a number, but you'd never be able to use the phone directory because there's not audio feedback to it. So it's, finding a balance for somebody when they're needing a phone. The middle one is a Serene phone, has nice big numbers. It has a talkback feature where you can hear when a button is pushed. You can hear that it's 2 or 3, and then you can back out of that if you make an error in the dialing. The Clarity phone on the right also has nice big buttons, and that also then has a visual display on it as well. So they're just 3 different looks to corded phones. Cordless phones, sorry. Thank you. Okay, the next slide gives a few tips on adding touch cues to phones. First of all, it's often difficult to add additional touch cues to phones because the buttons don't accept the sticky back raised dots, and the dots are often too high a profile and easily get knocked off those buttons. So if you do need to add touch cues to phones, a couple of the things that have worked are these really tiny locator dots that are intended to be used on computer keys, but if you cut them down a little bit, they fit on most phone keypad keys, buttons. Raised paint is another in a marked area around the button that will draw either tactile or visual attention to a key button. It's important to mark as few buttons as possible rather than trying to raise a whole bunch of buttons. So the 5 key on almost every phone keypad already has a raised dot on it. Won't guarantee that everyone does, but almost all of them do, and that's often a way that people can orient to the technique that Virginia was showing. But some people might find it easier to mark that 1, 2, and 3 button, and then they can easily move their fingers down once they get them oriented on the main 3 buttons that they need. Sometimes it's helpful to mark, like when people live in an apartment and they have to dial the 9 button in order to let somebody into a security door. So that's another one that's easy to mark for people so that they can quickly reach over, find it, and let someone have access to the building. And then, of course, make sure that anything that you put on a phone is a raise mark doesn't interfere with the phone's operation. And so on flip phones or slide phones, cell phones, a lot of times those buttons can interfere with the phone actually closing. So you just have to be careful of that when you're using raised dots. Okay, so we're now going to talk about flip phones. I'm going to pass the phone back to Virginia, and she's going to say a few words about a new phone called an Odin phone.
The Odin phone is a phone that has been specially designed for ease of use by visually impaired people. Its features and keys are, they're well contrast. It has a speaking feature, so that everything will talk to you. It also can do text messaging, so it's not a smartphone, but it can do some things that other cell phones can't, regular simple cell phones can't do. So we do have a video that we'll show.
Odin is ready. You probably just heard something that maybe you didn't understand, but the phone said, Odin is ready. It's ready to make a call. We don't have a keyboard showing. We can do this from the closed position on the phone. Odin is ready. Odin just said that it is ready to take a call. We're going to go into the menu and we're going to do that from our contacts list. Call log. Contacts. Contacts, it just said contacts, and so we're going to choose that. Amy. We have Amy first. Brent. Brent is second. Jean. Jean is third, and we're going to call Jean by hitting the green square button. Calling Tojian in progress. We're going to hit it again to put it on speaker. Loudspeaker on.
Hi, this is Jean Telscher with the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired. I'm away from my desk.
I'm going to end this message now. Going to end this message now. Wait.
Odin should have said.
It should have said call. It did say call ended, but we wait a long time for it to say that. It has a conventional keypad. Whenever you open the phone, it will tell you the time. So now we have the keypad visible. We are out of contacts, and so now we can make a call with using the regular keypad. I would say that these buttons are distinct, but they are like any cell phone. They're not terribly raised, otherwise you couldn't open and close it very well, but they are large and there are spaces between them. I'm going to call the council's main number, and you'll hear that the keys talk, although you might not understand it.
2 5 5 1 1 6 6.
And then I'm going to hit the green call button.
Calling to 2551166 in progress.
I'm going to hit it again for speaker.
Loudspeaker on.
Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired. This is Heather.
Bye.
Bye.
Now Odin will say end call eventually.
Call ended 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 30 seconds. Odin is ready.
Now it's ready to make another call. You can text with this phone as well, with the regular text input method. 2 is A, B, and C. 3 is, the next 3 letters, etc. So you can send a text message as well.
The other phone that has been adapted for ease of use by visually impaired and blind users is a phone that's been around for longer, and it's the Jitterbug phone. It does many of the same things that Odin phone does, but it has one distinct feature in that you can talk to an operator, an old-fashioned operator who can have access to your contact list and do the dialing for you if you can't do it yourself. And we do have a video using the Jitterbug as well.
Okay. This is the Jitterbug phone. I'm going to turn it on. The off-on button is relatively small. It's above the end button or the no button, but when you push it, it's going to play music. That tells me that the Jitterbug phone is on, and we don't have an account set up with this one, but I'm pushing the numbers so that you can see that the numbers are quite large. And if you push the 0 down here, you will get a human operator who will make a call for you from your contact list, or who will look something up for you as well. The buttons are round. They have an identifiable little ring around each button, so they're very distinct and very easy to use. They're much easier to feel than the buttons on the Odin were. So if we wanted to make a call and we had the availability to do that, we would put our fingers just on the buttons the same way we did with the other phones. The Jitterbug phone was designed for seniors, and it was featured in the ARP magazine, quite a bit. And so that's why these features are not particularly designed for blind people. But you can also set it up for voice dialing if you need to.
Okay, just to show you a few pictures of the Jitterbug and the Odin that were on the video. The middle one is a Doro phone. Doro is very similar to the Jitterbug. Just a phone, doesn't give any auditory feedback, has big buttons, and has a good-sized display on it. What makes the Odin unique is the audio feedback that it provides you. There still exists some flip phones out there that do provide what's called readout as well as voice recognition. And these are 3 of them that do that. The readout feature that you have to make sure that a phone has if you go with a flip phone is to make sure that readout reads all menus and items in the menu. So the Samsung Gusto, if you get like Samsung Gusto 2, it will read the menu name, but it does not read the menu items. Whereas the Gusto 3 reads the menu items. The Samsung Convoy 3 also is fully accessible because it reads out menus, items in the menus, reads out any key that you push, button that you push on the phone. And the LG Revere 3 also does that. So these are 3 of them that are still out there for simple phones, simple cell phones for people who want to carry a cell phone rather than all that you have when you have a smartphone. So that you can have a cell phone, you can make phone calls, you can find your way around it by listening. And you can make calls either by listening and then pushing send or using voice recognition. And as with all cell phones, just to mention, is to make sure that a carrier covers an area that someone's going to get a cell phone in. So the Jitterbug, for example, that one I've personally had some problems with or have heard about problems from some consumers who live north of the Dane County area, that it didn't work very well there. And I've had some difficulty with that one as well in the western part of the state where I travel. So make sure that cell coverage is going to work well for whatever phone you're going to get or recommend for a client. Okay, so we're going to talk about smartphones, and I'm going to pass it back to Virginia.
Smartphones are the kind of phones that all sons and daughters want to get for their parents. And they're smart and they do things, but you have to learn how to talk to them and how to make them do things. There are 2 big categories of smartphones, iPhones and Android phones. We have a video demonstration of the iPhone because I have an iPhone and we used it, and you will see a demonstration of using Siri, using VoiceOver to make a call and using communicating with Siri to do that. We can do the demo now, and then we can talk a little bit more about smartphones after.
We are at the home screen of the iPhone, and my phone and email and the other important apps that I use all the time are at the bottom of the screen. And when I am in my phone, I use, instead of a double tap, I use a split finger tap. So when I go to my phone,
Page 2 of 4. Dock. Mail. 8. Phone. 2 new items. Phone. No. All
now
contacts.
my
Heading.
phone is open and it's in my contact list. So I'm going to demonstrate how to make a call, and I'm going to do it in two different ways. First, we're going to do the easiest way, and the way that most blind people or partially sighted people use to make calls when you have Siri available. So what I will be doing is pushing the home button and keeping my finger on it, and I hear a beep, and then you'll see what happens. Call 608-237-8106.
Calling wait. Speaker.
Hi, this is Jean Telscher with the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired.
Hi, Jean. This is Virginia calling from the video demo, and this is the end of the message. Bye.
End call. Button. End call.
Next, I'm going to demonstrate how to make a call from your contact list. As you can see, the screen is on my contact screen, and I'm going to call the Wisconsin Council of the Blind. And first, I will double tap, or in my case, I'll split tap on the name.
Wisconsin Council. Sent notes. Home. 608255.
Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired, may I help you?
I'm going to end the call now.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Now, that is our demonstration. It is by no means a tutorial. We're not going to do tutorials on the iPhone, although it may be something we might do in the future because they're very popular and you can do a lot more with them except calling. But there are tutorials available from Hadley, from Apple Vis, and from National Braille Press. And there, are lots of tutorials for basic beginners, users of iPhones, also more advanced functions and using different apps. And Apple Vis rates different apps in their use, whether they're easy to use or not accessible or whatever. Besides Siri and VoiceOver, if you are partially sighted, you can use the zoom feature and magnify the screen. There are special accessibility settings for hearing impaired people, and Apple has done a very good job. Android phones, which are all the phones other than Apple iPhones, are not quite as easy or straightforward to use because there are different features and there are different operating systems depending on what brand of phone that you get. You can get the most common operating system is TalkBack. I'm not an Android phone user, so I'm not at all an expert on Android phones, but Android phones are usually cheaper than an iPhone. They have many of the same features, but you don't have access to the same kind of tutorials and help and assistance that you have in in the iPhones. So I think you can do other things, like you can have fun with Siri. You can ask her what restaurants are near you. You can ask her to identify a song that's playing in the background. there is, of course, the KNFB Reader app that is a wonderful app for an iPhone that will, with some practice and some very easy to follow training cues that the app has set up within itself, you can use to read a printed page. So apps from the App Store can be anywhere from free to the NFB app is $99, but it's much less expensive than any of the standalone reading machines or the reading machine software. So that's just a bit about iPhones and smartphone technology, and I'm going to give this back to Jean to talk about a couple of more options.
Okay, going to just say a few words about free cell phones. There are free cell phones that are available to people who are low income. There is an income eligibility criteria to get the free cell phones. There are a number of carriers in Wisconsin, and as soon as my slide comes up, which on mine it hasn't come up, it does list them, but there will be a resource list that you all will get, and it'll have a link to that. The free cell phones, one thing to keep in mind with the free cell phones is that you cannot specify the kind of phone that you want or the features that you may need on that phone. You get whatever phone they send you. I actually was able to get one changed, but it took almost 6 months before we finally got a phone that did work for the individual, and a lot of calls. With a free phone, people get 250 free minutes per month. With most of them, they can purchase more time if they need it. And most of the ones that I've seen have had voice recognition on them, although not very good voice recognition. These are often refurbished phones, so they're not the highest quality, or they're not going to be the latest phones that are out there. The other program to say a few words about is the TEP program. And the TEP program is the Telecommunications Equipment Purchase Program. And this is a program to help people with disabilities buy specialized equipment they need in order to use basic telephone services. To qualify for TEP, a person has to be deaf, hard of hearing, speech impaired, or mobility impaired. And I bring this up because many of our older people with vision loss also have hearing impairment as well, and may qualify for the TEP program, or may be eligible to get a voucher through the TEP program. There is no age or income level, income limit required for the TEP program. Anyone can apply for it who does have a hearing impairment, or a speech impairment or mobility impairment, and needs specialized equipment. The picture on the screen is just a picture from the TEP brochure that's out there and gives a little information. The type of disability determines the amount of voucher that a person gets in order to pay for that specialized equipment. This also will be on the resource list for people to use. Okay. So we're going to stop for a few minutes here and check in if there's any questions. I appreciate you all hanging in there since we started late and are now running late. So if you have questions, either use your mic to ask or type them into the public chat window. And so I'm going to turn off my mic in case anybody out there, I don't see anybody with their hand raised, but I'm going to turn mine off for a little bit just to give people a chance to ask if they have any questions.
I have a question. What about talking caller ID?
caller ID. Thank you, Virginia, for correcting that. A number of the phones that we showed do have talking caller ID as an option. The Serene phones, many of those do. Many of the Clarity phones have talking caller ID. The Panasonic, which was one of the more basic phones, has a good talking caller ID. So if you don't have a talking caller ID on the phone that you have, you can get a separate little box, thank you, that will give you talking caller ID that is just put in line with your existing phone. So basically your cord from your jack goes into that box, and then a box goes from the box to your existing phone. But a number of the phones now do have talking caller ID. Okay, any other questions? There is a question in the chat box about, can one try out corded phones somewhere? We do have, here at the council, we do have some of the phones. Not all of the phones that we showed do we carry here at the council. The council carries the big button corded phone, the Panasonic phone, one of the Clarities, the Bell phone, and I think those are the main ones that we currently are carrying. We also have the Odin phone here for people to try, and a Jitterbug for people to see. The independent living centers in your area are a good place, and somebody else, Carrie Ann, just put that is a possibility. But that is an option for people to go and try out phones. They will often have a selection of a variety of adaptive devices that you can at least get your hands on and see whether or not it's something that will work for you, or that you can see it, because that term big in terms of big buttons or clear in terms of the contrast of the display are all relative to whatever your eye condition is, so it is always good to be able to try them out. The Panasonic phones, the Clarity phones, those are phones that are also out and about in just some of the big box stores that you can try out. The other place is, if you're in the Milwaukee area, is at Universal Link. A number of the phones that we talked about are at Universal Link. Okay, then we had a question about how to get a free phone. A free phone, we will send a link where you can, in our resource list, there will be a link, and go to that link, and there is the application that's associated with the carrier that you provide. So, for example, the carrier that I'm familiar with in the area that I cover is a SafeLink carrier, and so you click on SafeLink, and it goes to their application, and you can fill it in online and submit it directly that way. Let's see. Then there was a comment, in addition to TEP, there is a Lifeline program for free phones, and the Lifeline is the same as the one that we had mentioned, the free government program, because people can have either a Lifeline phone have either a free cell phone or a Lifeline. They have one or the other is a free option. They can't have both. And so keep in mind that those two programs are based on income, so you have to meet income eligibility criteria. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my mic again just to see if there's any other questions that are out there. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. Let me just do a quick check, because I just had a funny sound in my headset, but no, I don't see anybody waiting in queue. And I don't see any other questions in the public chat window. So we're going to go ahead and close. First of all, I want to thank today's sponsor, which is MG&E, who provided some financial assistance for us to have these webinars. I'd like to thank Virginia for being here, and also for putting up with me as we did the videos. She did many retakes on those videos so that we could get what we needed here. And thank you for your patience today. Apologize again about the mics. Not exactly sure what happened there. We will have the webinar will be archived, and it will be archived until September 9th. And it's on September 9th that we have our next webinar, and our next webinar will be on Veterans Services. And so Kurt Brunner, who is the VIST coordinator for the veterans at the Middleton VA, will be our speaker at that one, along with Amy Werf, our low vision